Hello and welcome to part three, which I think will be the final part of my uh, consideration of Anthony Riley's dissertation. Um, we left it with Anthony having somewhat misrepresented the Eratosthenes experiment and looking at Slice Barkane's wonderful demonstration of some very similar data gathered measuring shadow lengths and showing that the Earth is indeed spherical and that the Sun is far away. Really, we shouldn't need anything else to utterly disregard everything that is in Riley's dissertation. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the approach that Anthony takes in this dissertation and why it is so wrong. Um, I hesitate to use the word fallacious, but it's just incorrect. He cites various things that he thinks is wrong with the current the way that science, particularly the heliocentric description of the solar system, is taught. He doesn't seem to have made much attempt to find out what is actually taught in schools, which on this subject, which is, I think, a bit of a problem. Um, let's deal with that first. Um, some things that are taught in school are taught as fact. So, a certain known chemical reaction will be taught as a fact. This chemical reacts with this one to produce these other compounds, for example. Um, it would be taught that the Earth has a magnetic field, to pick one of the subjects that Anthony tries to deal with. The fact that the Earth has a magnetic field is a fact. I don't think even Anthony would dispute that the Earth has a magnetic field. How that magnetic field is produced is not taught as a fact, or certainly shouldn't be. It's taught as a very likely explanation. Scientists think that the uh, dynamo effect, by which they mean the movement of liquid metal of iron and nickel in and around the Earth's core, causes a magnetic field to be produced. And that this seems to agree with our observations of the Earth's magnetic field. In my own field of biology, in as much as abiogenesis is covered at all in biology, it will be stated that we don't know how life arose on Earth. What scientists think happened is that various organic chemicals were formed by purely natural chemical processes, and that combined with some natural physical processes like the movement of water and heating of water and dissolving of various minerals in water around perhaps deep sea vents or in volcanic locations and so on, led to the formation of small vesicles with organic molecules inside them. And that one of these vesicles was in some way able to reproduce its contents, and either probably mechanically it split into two and then reproduced its contents and then split into four, and all of a sudden natural selection could begin. This first thing probably wasn't truly alive, but had the potential to become truly alive under the influence of some selection processes that would go on during that early chemical reaction. But it wouldn't be taught that this is fact, that this is exactly how it happened. There is an RNA world hypothesis. There are various metabolism world hypotheses and protein world hypotheses and so on. And they're taught as, we don't really know, but these are good candidate ideas. Science in school is taught as fact where it is fact, and it's taught as, well, we're not too sure, but we think perhaps this seems to make some sense in those situations where there is still some debate, some ambiguity. And that continues through university educations and so on. What Anthony does is largely to misrepresent evidence and to ignore vast amounts of evidence that is contrary to the thesis that he is trying to propose. He fails to mention all kinds of evidence that confirms the distance that the Earth is from the Sun, or that supports the idea that the Earth itself is spherical, or that it has a molten, partially molten iron and nickel core. He also spends a lot of time attacking, or a bit of time anyway, attacking TV personalities who present science on television, when that's got nothing to do with the subject of his thesis. What's taught on television is irrelevant to what's taught in schools, or what's made into television programs. And most people know the difference between a television program, even one that it purports to be educational, and what you're taught in a formal educational establishment like a school. He questions the validity of various methods that we use to do things like measure the distance to the sun, but he ignores the fact that although certain assumptions may have been made when the original calculations were done, and the calculations would have been made, and whoever made them said, well, I'm assuming that Venus is the same size as the Earth for the purpose of these calculations, and if you do that, you come out with a distance of 93 million miles to the sun. What happened subsequently was that the size of Venus was actually measured and by various means, and found to be the same size as the Earth. We already had a pretty good hint from its orbit and Newton's gravity equations that it was going to be about the same size as the Earth anyway, and other data would have confirmed that. And now the assumption of the similar size no longer is an assumption, it's a known fact, and it confirms the 93 million miles distance to the sun. And all through his dissertation, Anthony completely ignores the evidence, large bodies of evidence that will discredit his view that the heliocentric description of the solar system is wrong. He challenges Einstein, which is just hysterically funny for somebody who's made the kind of crazy non-scientific comments that Anthony has, to be challenging one of the great geniuses of all time. He states that Einstein's equations are purely theoretical. They come only from his mind and therefore are not proper science and shouldn't be taught as proper science. But it's utterly untrue. Theoretical physics is a perfectly valid branch of science. What happens to the products of theoretical physics is they get tested in the real world and the real universe. So Einstein's theories of relativity predicted that there would be such a thing as gravitational lensing. And gravitational lensing was observed back in the 1920s and has been observed many times since. It also predicted the existence of gravitational waves as a result of two black holes colliding, for example, and we have indeed seen these gravitational waves, or measured them, in this century. Einstein's theories have been validated by proper experimental testing and observation of the real universe. Now, the basis behind Anthony's thesis seems to be that um, any crazy idea or any alternative idea, if you prefer, should be given equal credibility within a science classroom. And this is complete nonsense. I'm sure there are people who have ideas that Anthony would consider crazy, and I doubt very much that he would want those ideas to be taught in the classroom. Um, there are people who think that drinking urine is a good idea, or that food is not necessary. You only need air to breathe and you will live perfectly well. Some people think that fairies exist, or unicorns exist, or Santa Claus exists, or that David Copperfield really did make the Statue of Liberty disappear, or that they are Elvis, or that they are Jesus, or, you know, something crazy like that. Such people deserve to be marginalized and ignored. But don't misunderstand me. If someone, for example, really did catch a fairy and was able to show that this fairy could do some supernatural stuff as well as being a small pink magic person with wings who could fly around, then scientists presented with that evidence, although they might be skeptical to begin with, once presented with the evidence, they would accept it and probably be falling over themselves to study this little winged pink magic person and trying to work out how on earth they did what they did. The same, this applies to all science teaching. If if good evidence comes along, if a good alternative explanation for something comes along, it is accepted, and if it's better than the existing ideas, then it will supersede them. If it sort of can run in parallel with them, it will run in parallel with them. And these things are taught to children, they're taught to students in universities where they exist. To claim that geocentrism or flat Earth has any evidence supporting it is simply to misunderstand what evidence actually is. I mean, at one point, Anthony cites Eric Dubé's 200 proofs the Earth is not a sphere or that the Earth is flat, as you know, if even one of these is correct, then the Earth is the heliocentric description must be thrown out. Well, he obviously has never read these 200 so-called proofs. Most of them are, well, all of them are completely wrong, and most of them, or some of them anyway, are not proofs at all. For example, number 189 simply states that some ancient writings and scriptures say the earth is flat. Well, so what? They were wrong. This is not a proof that the earth is not spherical. It's simply a comment, a statement that ancient civilizations didn't know what shape the earth was. So he doesn't even get things like Eric Dubé's stuff correct when he cites it. Um, the whole basis for his thesis, that from the legal argument, which seems to be based on a misinterpretation of what a judge defined a word to mean, and Anthony's clutched onto that word, forgetting that in the original document that word was part of a phrase and was referred only to partisan political um, things, um, through to the terrible presentation of evidence. I mean, badly presented, but terrible evidence. I mean, stuff that just isn't evidence that the Earth is not spherical, or that the heliocentric description of the solar system is wrong. He misrepresents the heliocentric description of the solar system as a reification fallacy. But it clearly isn't. It's a description of the real solar system based on real observations and real measurements of that solar system made over hundreds of years by thousands or millions of people. A reification fallacy is treating a hypothetical or abstract concept as if it were real. Well, the solar system is not hypothetical or abstract, it is real. And we have lots of evidence about the nature of it, and all that evidence points to it being a heliocentric system. So he can't even get his claimed fallacies correct. It's got that wrong. The whole thing is utterly wrong, as well as bringing up like old chestnuts like you can't have an atmosphere next to the vacuum of space, and the Kohler borehole not going very deep when actually it went 12 kilometers, which is pretty staggering. I think it was 12. Or the generation of the Earth's magnetic field by movement of iron nickel, liquid iron nickel in the core. As I said, that's a pretty solid scientific theory, but I think there's some credibility to saying, well, it maybe not absolutely nailed down in all details yet. But the other two don't prove anything. Atmosphere next to a vacuum is fine. Gravity deals with that issue, that problem. And gravity is a real thing, even though Anthony, will go around saying it's not a force. I don't care whether it's a force, and neither does anybody else. It behaves in the same way as a force. It can be measured in newtons like a force, and we can see the acceleration due to gravity. Gravity is there, it exists. Even if you want to just talk about density, Riley, you know that objects fall towards the Earth. And I'm going to do another video soon which shows that objects fall towards the moon when they're on the moon. So they don't always fall towards the Earth. And it's not just to do with density and the Earth, and there's no universal down. But your whole arguments are spurious. Arguments about the rotation of the southern stars, completely spurious, completely false. And the cooling moonlight argument, I mean, that's been debunked so many times. You must be aware that it's been utterly debunked. It simply isn't true. And if you want me to give you examples of people who've done proofs that it's not true, I'll happily do that. I know Greater Sapien has certainly done one. You also claim that we see too far for the Earth to be spherical, but that's not true either, and no single example has ever been found of that. The one you cite of Blackpool Tower is completely false. It's not true. It's been demonstrated to you over and over again. Every time you've tried to claim that we see too far, like the Great Isle of Man debacle, you've ended up having to accept that you were utterly wrong. And presenting things that are utterly wrong and claiming that they are true is exactly what you are kind of accusing the education system of doing, and it isn't doing it. So what do we have overall in this thesis? Well, we've got a rather poorly written, very disorganized, it jumps around all over the place, scientifically illiterate critique of the way science is taught in schools, masquerading as a legal argument that is itself based on a misinterpretation of the meaning of the phrase partisan politics. So if I was grading this, and I'm not a legal scholar, so grading it from a legal point of view is probably not something you should pay much attention to from me. But just from the science point of view of it, and from what I know about education, I give it an F minus. No, a Z minus. It is abysmal.